So all of those people who took part in this animation challenge of the dream sequence, I wish you all the best for this challenge. This was an amazing challenge, to be honest. The template itself was extremely hard, and I think I say this for everyone, but when we saw the first live stream, we actually saw a template that was pretty much confusing. Nobody had any idea of what they were gonna make. Many people were confused with this template and what to do with it. But ultimately I saw a lot of progresses on internet and I saw a lot of amazing art. So yeah, this challenge was fun, and this was my submission for the dream sequence challenge. When I saw the template of the dream sequence, all I could think of immediately were two ideas. Either I was gonna make a sequence where I was gonna go through FNAF 1 to FNAF 4 and add some beats with, like, let's say jump scares or kills, or I could do the Demon Slayer Infinity Castle movie thing. The reason why I went with the Demon Slayer idea is because it was harder technically for me, because I've never done something like that before, and it was a great learning opportunity for me. See, to me, these challenges that we take part in, especially the ones given by Powisher, but creativity thrives under pressure, and when we finally get a deadline of making something amazing, and that improves our skills. Do a little quick bicep check. Oh yeah. I'm so dumb. So yeah, in this video I'm gonna break down how I made this animation right here in 5 parts so that you guys can take some things from it. I know this animation isn't the best, it's probably more average than most people's animations, but it's something that I'm proud of. I was able to make it in a very short period of time. Took me approximately 2 weeks to make this one. I wasn't gonna spend a lot of time on an animation like this because my exams were going on right now. So without any further ado, let's begin. So when I was starting this animation of Demon Slayer, all I could think of is that how should I get the characters? And well, you can totally legally get the Demon Slayer assets from the Demon Slayer video games. The problem is, those assets have rigs that are completely unusable. Like, I was not gonna be able to animate anything using those assets. So I went with my second best option, and that was using the metahumans. Now, this might sound crazy because yes, of course, metahumans are nothing like anime, and that was exactly my point. I was not going to make an anime styled art in like 2 weeks. The thing is, I have never approached stylized animation or anime like animation, so I wasn't gonna do that because I did not even have enough time to learn that. I noticed that in Demon Slayer, most characters get their distinct characteristics from their clothes, their textures of the clothes, because they are of very unique designs, as you can see right here. And so I thought maybe I can just make a metahuman that is accurate in height and physicality and then give it clothes and hairstyle of the Demon Slayer characters, and that is what I did. So I modeled the hair and the weapons and the clothes for all the demons in the Infinity Castle. In the Infinity Castle movie, we saw 4 major fights, and so I included all of those 4 major fights within my animation, and yeah, well, I made their clothes, I made their hairstyle. That is how I got my metahumans to look like this. Now, second and the more hard part that was going to be a little hard for me as well was going to be the visual effects. See, in Demon Slayer, most of the action sequences don't actually hold a lot of motion by the characters themselves. They actually provide you motion with visual effects of these waters and thunder and whatnot. And so I have to add motion using some visual effects that would look appropriate for that situation. For example, when first time Shinobu stabs Doma, there is like this big purple, pinkish, black effect behind her. And that gives the motion to her attack because there is no real weightage to the animation itself. It's the weightage is being added by the visual effects. Now, I was gonna make my own visual effects, and I actually did make my own visual effects for Zenitsu because I wasn't able to replicate the exact look that I wanted for Zenitsu by just using some visual effects assets. With that said, I was able to get a lot of these visual effects just by using sword trail visual effects. See, the thing is that in Unreal Engine, you don't necessarily have to attach a certain visual effect to a certain object. You can attach a sword trail visual effect to my hand and I can just wave my hand around and produce a trail, right? And so that is what I did with Shinobu. I basically added purple, pinkish, and all that dark sword trail visual effect behind her, and I gave a timed track for that visual effect to be triggered exactly when she stabs, which was going to be my second beat in the animation. And that is how I continued my beats. In the animation itself, you will have 9 beats, 4 out of which were going to be attacks of the demon slayers, and the other 5 will be the doors that we go through and the camera moves and stops. So yeah, after making the Shinobus, the Zenitsus, and the Gyus and Tanjiro's attacks visual effects using the sword trail visual effects, I was able to get something like this. And to be honest, I'm actually proud of the result. Not the best, you definitely know that the anime does a lot better job at the same thing, but yeah, that is how I was able to get the visual effects to be more emphasizing. Now the third part was going to be another difficult thing for me, and that is going to be to replicate the spectacle of Infinity Castle itself. For those of you who have watched the Infinity Castle movie, and even for those of you who have not watched it, it's basically a castle that is pretty much infinite. There are so many buildings that repeat themselves, but you might think that's easy to make, right? Because you can just make one building and copy it. Infinity Castle has this very linear randomness to it. While the buildings do repeat themselves, they repeat themselves in this like very backroomsy style, you know? And so you have to make things that don't make sense, if that makes sense. Oh boy, I'm so bad at explanations. And so what I did was that I divided each fight into different arenas that we saw in the movie themselves. And so I modeled the inside of the Doma's castle, and actually pretty accurately to the anime itself. And I also modeled the Kaigaku's room where Kaigaku and Zenitsu fought. Then came the Gyu's part, where Gyu and Akaza were fighting on 2 huge platforms in the middle of the Infinity Castle. This took me a while because I had to make 2 or 3 models of buildings and then replicate them all around. But yeah, it was something that I was still able to do. And finally, I ended with modeling the arena where Tanjiro and Akaza fought. And after making all of those, I had my arenas. But there was one big problem, and that was lighting and ambience. So the lighting and ambience of Infinity Castle is very distinct in its own way. The thing is, Infinity Castle has this very setting sun-like lighting, but from the middle without any sky. So I cannot just simply use a sky texture or a skybox or HDRI to replicate that lighting. That's not really gonna work. So what I did was kind of ridiculous, but it also works to replicate the lighting look. I started to make these cubes where I gave volumetric lighting or ambience, because in case of Doma's castle, we see this like fog coming from top to bottom. The same thing we see in Kaigaku's arena. But in case of Gyu and Hakaza's fight, the fog was actually sitting in the bottom, a very blue dark fog, and then there was like this horizon of sunset on the middle. And so to replicate that lighting itself, and so to replicate that middle horizon sunset lighting, I actually just took a screenshot from the movie, projected it onto a plane, and then used an emissive texture to project lighting into my scenery. That is how I was able to replicate this lighting right here. And what this does is that it doesn't just give me the whole lighting effect, it actually gives a illusion that Infinity Castle is extending far behind than what it actually is. So while this method seems cheap, because it is cheap, it's like a jugaad, it's still really good and it still works really well. Now after putting all the elements that we made together, the final step, which was going to be probably the hardest step in terms of how much I can marry this animation to the realism versus the anime style that it had, was going to be compositing and post-processing. By the way, I did use some console variables in order to render my animation in Lumen itself and make it look really good, and it worked actually. It looked really good, honestly. But then I brought that EXR sequence into my DaVinci Resolve and I started to compile it, and I started to color grade it, some compositing here and there. Another thing that I noticed was that I was not using bloom in Unreal Engine, because I thought I was gonna add the bloom effect in DaVinci, because I assumed that DaVinci is going to be better at adding bloom. Maybe I'm not skilled enough with DaVinci just yet, but the bloom effect that I was getting through DaVinci wasn't as desirable. It was cinematic, sure, but it was a lot more hazy. Whereas in Unreal Engine, I was getting a lot more control over my bloom using the post-processing volume, and I wanted this like very unique aesthetic where the light would be the only source of bloom and there will not be a lot of bloom all around. And so yeah, that was something that I was able to do better within Unreal Engine itself rather than doing it in DaVinci. Maybe some of you guys can do it better in DaVinci, but combining all of these things, the things that I explained, this was the final animation. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with my animation. It's not the best, obviously. It's far from even the top 100, even the top 1000 if there was a montage for that regard. But I am still pretty happy with this animation because I was able to learn a lot more technicalities of what and how I should be animating stuff. So yeah, after making this animation, I'm pretty happy with it. In the comments, do let me know if you want any of these Demon Slayer assets that I've modeled, because they are pretty much useless to me. And they do use some assets in themselves as well, such as the lamps that I placed in the Infinity Castle. I have not modeled those lamps. I found that lamp on the Sketchfab. So yeah, if you want those assets, just comment down below and I will be linking those assets in my next video. And do let me know, did you like my animation? What did you make? And feel free to give your links in this comment section to promote your animations as well. And with that said, I hope you have a good one.